Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Today we're talking with my good friend Shawn from New Mexico. He's got a great church, and we're talking about should we hire on the outside or should we always raise leaders within? It is a great coaching conversation. Check it out. Let's jump into it, man. How can I serve you today?
Well, Chris, we've been here 14 years, going on 15 years. Started out with 7 people in the church. Church has grown, and we've done we feel like we've done a good job over the years, equipping, empowering, encouraging, training up, raising up leadership from within the church. But we're at a stage where we've been, over the last couple of years, hiring staff. The first one that I hired was somebody that we raised up from within. It was a teenager that we actually reached while he was in high school and built a relationship with him. He came to know the Lord, and we began discipling him, and we came to a stage where we needed to hire somebody, and he kind of fit the role. But they lasted about 9 months, the average youth pastor stay, and it was an ugly exit. It was an ugly transition, and it was so bad. Like, we were questioning, should we still be in the ministry?
Wow.
It was frustrating.
Wow.
And so then we decided, the next hire we do, we'll hire from outside. And so we brought in a young couple from Wisconsin, and they came here during COVID. So that was a unique thing because we were online only for a year, and brought some great things to the table, brought some new energy and creative elements, but they didn't last. They had their first child, and they were like, we want to go back home.
Wow.
So they were here a year and a half, almost 2 years. And so we've been, next week, it'll be a year since we've had a youth pastor. So my wife's been doing the youth ministry for the last year, and we're at that place where we want to hire, but we're trying to decide, do we look to find people from within the team, from within the church, that know our culture, who know how we function, or do we bring somebody from outside so that when it does go bad, we can just pack their bags and tell them it's time to move on? Because when you hire from within, a lot of times they're like family. You've got a long relationship with them, or sometimes they have other family, and if you have to part ways and it doesn't go well, they're still in town, and you got to live with the residual, pain of seeing them or hearing them talk about you throughout the community.
Yep. Well, you've got a subject that's got a huge pros and cons list. That's for sure. Personally, I always favor, although I do think it comes with a risk, I do favor hiring within because it is more likely to be a cultural match and more likely to have longevity.
Sure.
They're not just going to leave. Because they've already lived there for 10 years and they're probably not going anywhere. So those things I think are, to me, the cultural match as well as the longevity, to me, outweighs everything else. One of the things that might be considered, Shawn, and again, I'm not saying that you haven't done this, not saying it at all, but one of the things that you might want to consider is the beta testing or testing pilot, however you want to say it, prior to them joining the staff. So a lot of times I think we look at someone and we mark them as faithful, or we mark them as we like them and they're faithful. Well, that's good that you like them. It's good that they're faithful, but that doesn't mean that they're leaders. That doesn't mean they're going to operate well and play well in the sandbox, and they're going to, they're not going to become critical, or that they know how to raise up leaders, or they know how to strategize, they know how to build things. That doesn't mean any of that. It just means that you like them and they like you and they're faithful. I think that, one, again, love it because it's cultural match. Love longevity. Love both of those very much. I think it's very difficult to continually every year and a half changing over staff.
Yeah.
I think it's makes growth and momentum extremely difficult. However, or with that said, that's why I like it the other way. But I think you need to think about, okay, if we hire within and if we decide that this is the best route, what is the vetting process look like? What part of that vetting process do they even know? And what part do they not know? What part of the vetting process is visible? What part of the vetting process is invisible? The thing I always teach, especially not so much with staff, I guess I could work with staff, with leaders is task project position. I'm a big fan of that. Give someone a task. If they can do it, we know they can do task. Project is more, can they work with people? So yeah, they got to put on a picnic and get 15 volunteers, and they've got to, get bounce houses there and barbecue there, but they also got to get 15 volunteers signed up and running it. Okay, well, we know they know how to do the task, but now do they know how to recruit? Do they know how to build the people? Do they know how to organize? Do they know how to lead? Do they know how to strategize? Those are the kind of things I like to see before I even think about bringing someone on. So funny is I had a invisible conversation within the last week with someone that they don't know that I'm looking at them for a potential position in a certain part of the organizations that I run. They don't know that I'm looking at a certain position, but I'm just testing the water. And so far, it's not coming back good. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm good. I'm glad I'm testing this water, because I honestly didn't think that. I thought that they were. I'm like, they're not showing what I thought they had, and I'm like, thank the Lord that I'm putting them in this sort of 30 to 45 day testing the water with them, but them not knowing that I'm testing the water, them just thinking I'm asking for help and realizing that's not turning out the way I thought. And wow, if this was what they were getting paid for, I would be very frustrated. So
well, and we're at the place where, early on, when we were growing and we were developing and figuring out what our culture is going to be, we were at the point where it was like we just needed a warm body, know, and
I get that.
and that worked for a season. But now we're at that stage where we're embarking on a level of hiring and developing of things that they don't teach you at Bible college.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you take a business degree, they might teach you some of that. But from what I know, they don't teach you how to hire and fire and what those processes are and raising up from within. And so that's kind of where we're at, trying to figure that out. And we've done both. We've hired from within. We've hired from outside. Both ended up not going well, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to hire staff. Although I've said that a couple of times. Can we do this all on our own? And the answer we know is no, not in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to do, because trying to find staff. We've been looking for, like I said, for a year now, online and talking to people, and just can't find the right match for what we're wanting and what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so,
let me add one more, and I can't speak to this at all from an answer standpoint. It's just something worth investigating. So to look and say, okay, what is it like to be on our staff? Is there things that people are thinking that have been on our staff that leave and never tell us that we need to own? And I have no idea what that would be. I have no idea.
Sure.
Like, I need to own this. My wife needs to own that. We need to own that. This culture needs to own that. What is it? Is it something to do with their compensation? Is it to do with the way that the culture is, the vibe, the feeling of being valued, the feeling of, like, is there something that we're doing that doesn't create a magnetic gravitational pull?
Sure.
So that people want to be around us, and they are like, man, I want to be on that team. I want to join that team. Just get me on his team. Like, what's missing in that? And I honestly have no idea what that would be, because I've never talked to any of your staff members, but I think that's a question worth asking.
But you have been to Los Alamos. You've been to our non-restaurants and our non-recreational activities. If you don't like to hike, if you don't like outdoors, if you don't like killing things, then you're going to have a hard time wanting to come here.
That's for sure.
So,
I've been there. It's
so
beautiful.
we know New Mexico has some obstacles, and I think that's a lot of what we're trying to overcome, just because
of course
the culture that's here, and we're not in the Bible Belt. It's not easy.
And that's why I would say that the hiring within probably even looks more attractive to me. You have the cultural issue, you have longevity, but it's like you already live here because you like it.
Yeah.
There's some people that move there and it's like, this is not what I'm used to. It's not what I like. Nothing wrong with them for not liking it. That's just not who they are. So I think there's that. I do. And the other thing wasn't hey, Shawn, you're doing anything wrong. I have no idea. I've never spoken to your staff. I just always think like, what can we do to make sure that people that are on our team, how do we make it the best experience? Granted, we got the surroundings. Granted, it's a different city. I get all that. But what can we do? Is there something that we're not doing that would make it more attractional to be like, man, I love being on that staff because of the way they make me feel valued or whatever it is. And I have no idea what that is, but it's a constant question that I always ask. That's why I'm a big fan of exit interviews, but they're not always going to be honest, but once in a while they are. And you're like, okay, I didn't like the way he said it, but it's probably true. And I've had many times in my career where people will be like, I'm like, and then I drive down the street and I start thinking like, I didn't like the way he said it, and he could have said it nicer, but he's probably right.
And I think that works on both ends. Both ends though, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as leaders, we want to do better. We want to grow, and sometimes we have to hear those hard truths in order to stretch us to new levels and new strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, if you can figure out, I do think, and adding to it, like you said, the New Mexico kind of area where you live, I think it puts the hiring within even a little bit higher, because I think people could move to your area, the mountains area, and go, this is beautiful. But if they're not used to it and they're going to go steer crazy, like there's no restaurant, there's no nightlife, there's no it's going to drive me nuts, And so I think people can romanticize living there, but once they live there, it might not be what they're used to. It doesn't make them wrong. It's just not what they're used to. And then they're just like, we're out of here. Versus people that already live there and they like it. Yeah. So anyway, something to think about, a few things to think about. What else you got, man? What else you want to talk about today?
Our biggest thing, even on the same topic, I just felt like whenever I was thinking about today's podcast, going, how do I help grow myself in this? And one of the things, like I said, I've kind of been burned with this, with the hiring process and transitions. But I also don't want to get stuck and bitter or frustrated and be like, I'm just not going to hire staff and we're going to make it work the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so maybe some key points, maybe to help me move forward, to continue to develop my level of raising up leadership, or maybe some things to prevent.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, this Wednesday, when this airs, I'll already be over with, but we're talking all about leadership ladders. I think that's such an important part. I think you have to be more committed to the process than the idea. I don't think that you're not committed to the idea. I think everybody's committed to the idea. Who wouldn't say, I need to raise up leaders? I think any decent leader is going to say, I need to raise up leaders.
Right.
Okay, that's great. I think anybody would say that, but you got to be committed not just to the idea, but to the process. Like, what am I going to really do to raise up leaders here? Like, what am I actually going to do? What's that going to look like for me? What's the process? What's the time commitment? What's the strategy that I'm going to do? So one, I tell people all the time, and this ain't nothing new. You've heard this stuff, but I think there's a lot of things that we know to do and then we don't. It's like Paul said, he says, I know what to do and then I don't do it. And the things I don't want to do, I do. Well, there you go into leadership. I tell someone, You need to be committed to your own personal development. Yeah, I know. I'm like, okay, well, let's stop. What does that mean for you? What's the process? What do you mean? Yeah. Well, I read a book once in a while. Okay, that's it? That's all you do? Who's your coach? How often do you talk to them? How often are you on the phone with them? What are you guys currently working on? I got 2 coaches in my life. I talk to them all the time. I'm constantly growing. Like, okay, I got to figure this out. How do I do this? I'm going on 13 years with the same coach. Constantly, like, how do I get better? How do I develop? What do I do to help me figure this out? It's not every day, but I don't want 3 or 4 weeks to go by and me not have an hour to just stop everything and go, okay, I got to grow. So I think you have to be committed to the process, not just the idea. And
Sure.
I think that most people, probably 100% of the people committed to the idea, very few are committed to the process. Same thing with, okay, now that's only me personally, but I got to committed, not just the idea, the process when it comes to what does that look like? So when you ask the average person, when you ask the average leader, church of 100 to 400, hey, what do you guys do to develop leaders? They'll love the idea, but they can't give a really clear idea. Like, how do you actually develop leaders at the church? Tell me what that looks like. And a lot of people, I'm not
Sure.
saying you don't, I don't know, but a lot of people don't have a very clear idea. Like, how do you actually raise up these leaders? And the problem is I think sometimes as lead pastors, we leave it to very intuition and being organic. It's organic and it's intuition. The problem with that is organic and intuition isn't duplicatable.
Yeah.
That's good for you, but what's your wife going to do? And that's good for you, but what's the worship leader doing? That's good for you. What's the children's pastor doing? Are they raising up leaders? Are you guys raising up armies? Intuition is not duplicatable. Organic is not duplicatable. At some point, it's got to be, this is how we do it.
Yeah, there has to be some structure. Your
Absolutely.
intentional system in place.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
It's got to be able to clearly be identified. Like, okay, this is how we do it, man. We do step 1's this, step 2's this, step 3 this. This is how we do it. It takes this long. Here's what we do. We got to have a process that we're just sort of. It's almost like, baseball's all the analogy I always go to because it's my favorite thing. But it's like, well, it's like baseball saying we're not going to have AA, AAA, single A. Oh, well, let me tell you what you're not going to have is a future.
Right.
Move that over to church. We're not going to have that. Okay, well, then you're not going to have a future.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Well, and I think that's kind of where we're at today. I remember when you came years ago and worked with our leadership team, it was just quickly after that, we had a mass exodus of our church. And it was at our 10-year mark. So we didn't have a church split, but we had a mass exodus. Yep. And a lot of them were our leaders. And they were bitter at each other. They weren't bitter at us. They weren't bitter at the church. They were bitter at each other. So they all left, and none of them are going to church even today. But it was kind of hard. It kind of hurt us, like, while we had been growing and working on this process for so many years, and now all that work was just undone. And I think I can own that I haven't followed through with the process probably as well as I should have been, just because it hurt us,
Yeah.
And I saw how it hurt others, and I don't want that to happen. But I still have to take responsibility with the role that God's given me, and to continue to develop leaders,
100%.
knowing that there's going to be a Judas in every group.
Yep. Well, and you and I have talked about what happened several years ago. They're all mad at each other. One, I think we walk away going, did we create a culture that didn't allow Matthew 18 moments?
Yeah.
Because attitude is only content until it's expressed, or is never content until it's expressed. Attitude is never content until it's expressed. I tell people all the time, it's going to get expressed. In a month, in 4 years, it's going to get expressed. At some point or another, it's going to get expressed. So attitude is never content until it's expressed. It'll eventually get expressed. They eventually expressed it. Now, if they would have expressed it and dealt with it, Matthew 18, 4 years before, or whatever the magic number is, probably wouldn't have had that issue. So that's a cultural thing we learned. Like, okay, did we not foster that transparency and honesty in Matthew 18 culture? Okay, that's one thing we learned. The second thing we and I love that you're saying this is I got to own, like, I got to get back to the process.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get to the process of creating leaders, again, single A, double A, triple A, the Texas Rangers go, we're just canceling all our single A, double A, triple A. You know what that means? You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. There's no future for you. And I think as leaders
to pull from.
Yeah, there's nothing. And so as leaders, it's like, you do realize you're done. This is the best it's going to get for you. You might grow another 20%. You might go from 150 to 200, 250. You're never going to go to this status because you're not committed to, not you, but I would tell leaders, you're not committed to the process.
Yeah.
So you're saying no to your future when you say no to the process.
Gotcha.
And you got to be. So I think looking at your past, that was, you and I talked about it many times, very hurtful. People that you love, people that you poured into, it was very hurtful. They were mad at each other. They weren't mad at you. So they just said, we'll just leave the camp. Clearly, their true heart and spirit is revealed in the fact that they didn't deal with it as mature adults, exited the church, and aren't even in a church today.
Yeah.
Well, dude, that's the amount of immaturity on that list is just gigantic. But hey, we learn from it. We make sure we always have the Matthew 18 culture. We don't live in artificial harmony, and we get back to developing leaders because we're not. You and your wife are amazingly talented people and an amazing couple, but you're still only two people.
Right. Yeah.
So
we know we have limits as well.
Of course. So
yeah.
Like I've always told you, church always grows to the level of the pastor's personality.
Sure.
So it's like, between you and your wife, great leaders, outgoing, love people. You guys are awesome. You can get it to 100. You can get it to 200. Whatever the number is, you can get it there. But there will be a lid because you're just human and there's only two of you. So you got to get committed to the process, not just the idea.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's where we're torn. We're torn with the developing of leaders when you don't feel like you have potential talent that could even be developed to that next level. And I think that's where we kind of defaulted to, well, we've got to find somebody outside of the church. We've got to find somebody outside of our town, outside of our state. And some people think we're outside of the country because we're in New Mexico, but but we're not. You don't have to have a passport. You don't have to speak Spanish to live here. And there's amazing people here. But when you're trying to transition people that were great volunteers, I think that's kind of what you were talking about earlier. They might be great volunteers, but that doesn't mean that they're a great candidate for a staff position.
Yeah.
Trying to weed that out.
Yeah, you do got to weed that out, and I think you weed that out by the invisible. It's the invisible vetting.
What did you say earlier? You gave a process that you're
task project position.
Yeah,
that one.
Task project position.
So just the real quick, just to make sure, like task is they can do it on their own. So hey, can you, let's use the picnic analogy. Can you get 2 bounce houses there and a bunch of food? Okay, so they do it. You're like, they just seemed like they're very good at doing. Great. Project. That's a task with working with people. So now go back to the picnic. Okay, I don't just want you to go buy some food and throw some bounce houses out there. I need you to get 15 volunteers, get their lanyards, make sure they're all good, make it look all organized, have lines for the kids. It's an Easter egg hunt, whatever. Now all of a sudden you're like, man, they know how to raise up people. How'd they recruit? It's not just, they didn't just get their family. They got all sorts of people. And look at the way they're leading. They're walking around and they're charging everybody. At a huddle before, they prayed. And you're like, you watch a couple of those and you're like, man, they know how to raise up people. And so now you think about a position. Gotcha. Because you've already passed the task test. They passed the project test, which includes incorporating and recruiting, developing, leading people. Maybe they're ready for position. But if at the project, if it's like, it's 2 weeks before, Shawn, I can't get anybody to help out. I can't get anybody to sign up. I got all the food. I got the bounce house, but I can't get anybody to sign up. I can't get any help. What does that tell you? It's like, what's that going to look like when you put them as youth pastors? Like, nope.
Yes. Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Gotcha.
And that's when I'm backing up to that invisible vetting that I'm doing right now with someone a few days back where I'm like, not going to work. Yeah. It's not gonna. I am so thankful that I took my own advice, which sometimes I don't. Took my own advice, and I was like, "Man, I'm glad I'm doing this because this guy would not have been able to do this." And then I would have it would be a year long, bunch of money, a bunch of time, a bunch of headaches, a bunch of personal conversations, chance of ruining a relationship when I could have just invisibly vetted him or her.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Good stuff.
Anything else, man?
I guess the only other thing that would, again, dealing with the same thing. Same song, different verse. When you have people that maybe want to be in that position, but they can't do the task or the project.
Yeah.
How do you balance the, hey, we love you and you're a great volunteer, but I just don't think you're capable of leading in this capacity, and keeping them on board, without them getting their feelings hurt and then running with their tail between their legs.
Yeah, I wish I had a really golden answer for that one. I don't. I do know, and you know this. You can't sacrifice the entire organization to save the feeling of one person.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that you want to be mean, but the key for that really is, I think there's, at least I have done in the past, I try to steer them onto a different seat on the bus. And if they are just adamant about it, then I feel like the conversation has to be had. I'd love to just put them on another seat of the bus. They're happy.
Sure.
I'm happy. Everybody's happy. There wasn't this, difficulty, but find another seat on the bus. And if that doesn't work, have the difficult conversation. And I've had to sit down and just say, it's not going to happen. Yeah. I've done that before where I'm like, it's not going to happen. I don't see that in you. I do see this in you. I don't see that in you. And it's not going to happen. And I just want to be honest with you. I'd say most of the time it works out. There's one that's coming to my mind right now where it didn't work out good.
Didn't go as planned.
It did not go as planned, buddy.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna sacrifice the organization for that. Sure. I'm gonna have the tough conversation if I can't find a seat on the bus. But that's always a difficult thing, because there's a blindness to their ability.
Right.
I'm coaching a church right now. We do. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think there's times where you might be able to present this one of those scenarios, because like, hey, here's some areas that you need to grow in, and that doesn't mean that you're not you're off the table at this for the future, but right now you just don't have all the tool set that you need, and so we're going to put you in triple league. Yep. And see what you can do there. But here are some expectations, and here's some things that we're looking for to get you to the place that maybe you can lead in that way.
I think it's awesome. Absolutely. And I think that's when you get to that transparent conversations. Here's 2 or 3 things I think you could work on. While you're working on that, you're going to stay in the in the AAA, but we're not going to move you up here. And I think that's great. It gives them a little bit of hope. I think it gives them some honesty. Most of the time it works out. Once in a while, everybody's got a really distorted view of their capabilities. It's almost like that singer that dying to sing, but it's like, they can't sing though,
But everybody's been telling them since they were a little kid.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Their parents think they're amazing.
Exactly. And it's a funny example, but you move it over to, I'm going to be a youth pastor. I'm going to work in children's. It's like, nah, I don't think so. I don't, or, hey, I'm great to be a greeter. I'm like, dude, you don't even like people. Like, why do you want to be a greeter?
Right. You look angry at me right now.
Exactly. That's so awesome, dude. Well, cool, man. I hope this was helpful today, man. Always good to connect with you, man. I appreciate you so much. You guys got an amazing heart, man. And anything I can do to serve you, dude, I'm always here to help. Always.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being on today.
Sure thing.